The following episode was recorded for my podcast, Abundant Thinking. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, and Pandora Music. If you are somebody who enjoys listening to video or audio podcasts, I would highly recommend you check it out. Link in the description. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Abundant Thinking. Today, we are going to be talking about the quote, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great." What this quote is trying to say is the fact that you don't need to be amazing or talented at something to do it, but if you want to become talented and you want to become super successful world class, you have to start to begin with. One of my favorite things about this quote is it highlights the importance of how important it is to just start. Starting is the hardest thing in most endeavors. I don't want to say all of them, but the majority of endeavors, starting is the hardest thing. People think to themselves, okay, but if I start, how am I going to do this? If I start a business, how am I going to figure out my marketing? How am I going to figure out my sales? And the thing I have to say about that is your solutions become a lot more clear once you're actually in the situation. Because when you're thinking about what ifs, what if this happens? What if that happens? You're not in the situation where you're forced to find a solution. And more specifically, I'll give you guys a good example for starting a business for marketing, right? A lot of people think to themselves when they're first starting their business, they'll be like, okay, well, I don't know anything about marketing. How am I going to do this? And a lot of times it will detract people because they think, okay, this is impossible. I'm not going to be able to do this. Compare it to another person who has already started the business and he is in the position where he needs to figure out the marketing. That person is going to figure it out because he doesn't have another choice. It's either figure out the marketing or sink. Have your business go under, you're bankrupt, you don't have any money, you get rid of the business altogether. So to highlight what I just talked about is the fact that when you're in this certain situation, when you're trying to start something new, you think about all of these what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? But your feelings aren't so strong that you have to get that thing done. You're not required to do it because you just started this business. You're just thinking about the future possibilities. You're not actually in the situation. Compared to the person who actually needs to do that thing, it's a lot different because the person who needs to do that thing will get that thing done because that's his only chance. That's the only thing he has left. If we're talking about a podcast, for example, when I first started my podcast, I could have thought to myself, okay, well, how am I going to reach out to people? How am I going to get extremely successful people who have made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, who have influenced thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people onto my podcast? How am I going to do that? That's so scary, right? It's going to detract me because I don't have a solution. But there came a point in time in my podcast where I thought to myself, okay, I need to have some guests on because I want to not only improve my knowledge in this certain area in this topic that we're talking about, but I want to help you guys also succeed and be able to take some things out of my episodes. So when I was in that situation, I said, instead of how am I going to get my guests, I thought, what do I need to do right now? It's not a what if, what will, how will I have to do this thing in order to get my guests, right? It's not like on day one, I was telling myself, oh my God, I'm going to have to get guests. I don't know how to do that. That's it. I can't do this podcast. I can't do it because in the future, this is what I'm going to have to do. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to reach out to people. I don't know how to ask them to come on my podcast. But then 3 months in, when I thought to myself, okay, I've already started this podcast. I've done these things. I know what to do. But now I'm going to try to take it a little bit different. And I'm going to, try to get some successful people on my podcast and see how they can help me. What do I need to do? And I figured it out from there. A lot of times I talk about the fact that your solutions are a lot more clear when you're actually in the situation. This happens, and not happens, but this has been talked about way before this episode. I'm always talking about the fact that, when you're in the situation, you figure out your solution. You just do. So it's better to, I'm even reading a book right now. It's something on the lines of how not to let small things affect you. And then it says, all things, are small. Like nothing in this world is big enough for it to affect how you think, or at least most things, right? We don't want to take it out of context too much. But it's interesting because they were talking about the same thing. They said the problems And honestly, again, even in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, he says the same things. I'm paraphrasing, but when and if your problems come, you will have the same resources that you always have to draw on. Right? If you're put in the situation where, okay, you need to do this thing, you get it done. And I want you guys to think about, maybe something that was difficult in your life that you did, and you're going to think to yourself, man, I don't even know how I did that. How did I get past that point in time? How did I finish that project on time? How did I meet this person, right? It has a crazy way of working out because when you're in the situation where you have to do something, it's your only choice. You don't think 6 months into the future and say, okay, well, this thing, I don't know how to do it. I'm not going to do it because this thing scares me. But you have to do it, or you had to finish this project at the time. You had to do the thing. So starting is super important. And the point of me going on that little rant was to encourage you guys not to be scared of the future because you're going to be prepared for it either way, even if you don't know it. Take one step at a time. I know even extremely successful psychologists, when they're dealing with people who are clinically depressed, I'm not saying any of you guys are clinically depressed, but when you're comparing yourself, or at least most of you guys who are hopefully doing good, to somebody who's clinically depressed, it's a huge difference, right? But the thing that works and helps people that are depressed actually do things, right? The doctor will say, okay, well, you need to do something. How are you going to, instead of laying in your bed all day, actually do something with your day, little by little, right? The world's most successful psychologists, and this is talked about a lot, is they say baby steps, right? Break it down to the smallest thing. Okay, you don't want to go to the gym today? Well, get a 30-minute run in. You don't want to get a 30-minute run in? Go for a 15-minute walk. And you can make it smaller and smaller. I know Jordan Peterson was even talking on one of his podcasts about how one of his patients was so depressed that he wouldn't even get out of bed. So he would tell him, okay, well, try to just sit up, right? One step at a time. Just sit up. Another example is he said one of his patients was, or clients, my apologies, his room was extremely messy. He was never motivated to, clean up his room, and it made his mindset really bad. And he said, okay, what's the smallest thing you can do to make a difference? So he said, just move, I don't know, your vacuum cleaner's in the room. Just move it a little bit, just to the side, right? Just move it, put it in a place. That's it. Just one step at a time. And guys, this is super similar. I'm going to bring it back to starting new things, right? When you start something, don't focus on this long term, okay, in 6 months in this business, I need to have a sales team, marketing team. I need to be profitable, do this. Don't worry about that. Worry about, okay, by next week, I want to figure out the name, figure out the domain, figure out what I'm going to do in my niche. Okay, that's too much for you? All you're going to do for the next week is figure out a name. Because once you kind of get, like, you put your foot in, right? You're not too deep yet, but it's covering this metaphorical water, right? It's like this business. It's covering your feet a little bit, right? You already stepped in it. You already got the name down. You already figured out who it's for. So pushing it, going further and further, it gets easier and easier. But the hardest thing is getting in the water to begin with. A lot of people are so scared, right? Again, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And if being great is not the purpose of you doing something, you can improve so much. You can become so much better if you just start. I had no clue what I was doing for this podcast when I started. Was it 8 months ago, 7 months ago? Crazy to think about. But you learn. And I'll be honest, in a year, in 6 months, I'm going to look back at this time right now and say, I had no idea what I was doing either. Because I don't know how to do everything. I'm still learning. I have my light in the back right there, right? I'm trying to get a good background going. I'm trying to be as honest as I can. I'm learning how light works. I'm learning how technology, how to do this, how to edit everything. I'm learning, but at least I'm giving it a try, and at least I'm learning. And it's been so much easier to do this because I'm already doing it. I'm already knee deep into podcasting, right? It's something I love doing. So I'm learning. And again, starting was the hardest thing. In my experience, starting has been the hardest thing in whatever it is to do. Whatever I have planned on doing. My apologies, that wasn't the best wording. But if I want to do something, the hardest thing is, okay, how am I going to start? Rather than taking a couple steps, I used to always think so far in advance. Oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How is this going to work out? Oh, eventually I'm going to have to upload on different platforms other than Spotify. Are you kidding me? but it works out. And it works because eventually you get to the point where you have to make a decision. You either fail or you learn how to do it. You fail or you grow. And I think it's crucial for you guys to get to that point. But in order to get to the point, first you must start. I think it's also a big advantage with this quote, the fact that you understand starting is the hardest thing. If you understand starting is the hardest thing, get it out of the way. Rip the Band-Aid off. Just start. Just start. Do something that I talked about. Small baby steps. I have other podcast episodes on how to start something, how to make it easier. If you guys even want tips, I would love to help you. But please, just start. It is the hardest / easiest, but the most worthwhile thing ever. Starting is the hardest thing. I'm telling you guys. You have to start to be great, guys. And only you are able and in control of what you get done. So I urge you guys to start the thing you want. And from there, this podcast will help you with the rest. Mindset, how to get to where you want to go, how to achieve your goals. It's all on here. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. These episodes aren't sponsored, so please just give me a follow on whatever platform you're listening. Turn the post notifications on so you know when I upload, and I'll catch you guys later. Thank you so much for listening.